Just days before the scheduled summit in Anchorage, Alaska, Donald Trump's message came loud and clear. If Vladimir Putin did not agree on a path to end the war in Ukraine, very severe consequences would follow immediately. The statement was repeated in a series of speeches and press Q&A sessions from Washington to New York, serving as both a reassurance to allies and a warning to adversaries, while paving the way for what was described as the climax of the hottest political season of the year.
Yes, they will. Yeah.
What will the consequences
there will be
be?
consequences.
Sanctions, tariffs?
There will be, I don't have to say, there will be very severe consequences.
Evening news broadcasts across the U.S. and Europe all ran similar headlines. A very severe consequences warning ahead of the Alaska summit. What drew observers' attention was not only the sharp language but also the location.
No, it was always going to be, I was going to meet with President Putin, and then after that I'm going to call the leaders and President Zelensky. I'm going to call President Zelensky, and then I'll call, probably in that order, the leaders. There's a very good chance that we're going to have a second meeting, which will be more productive than the first, because the first is I'm going to find out where we are and what we're doing.
According to a schedule signaled by the White House to the press, the meeting would take place at Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson in Anchorage. A choice both symbolically geopolitical, the Bering Sea is not far away, and allowing for maximum security control. Several major outlets described it as the return of great power politics, a venue where ceasefire deals, sanctions, and the reallocation of influence could be sketched out in a matter of closed-door hours. Long-form reports from the Washington Post and Reuters also noted Europe's constant worry. Any concession on territory or sanctions could have lasting repercussions for the continent's security order. As usual, Trump raised expectations and set a very short political deadline. He claimed he would know in the first 2 minutes whether peace was possible, a remark that made veteran diplomats frown, knowing full well that ceasefire negotiations often require weeks, if not months, to outline terms. Still, his statement that he would walk away if conditions weren't right triggered speculation that the Alaska summit could end either with a vague joint statement or collapse quickly, followed by new sanctions. Reports from The Independent, PBS, and Fox News all quoted the 2 minutes remark verbatim, showing that the White House had deliberately turned emotional speed into a tactical bluff. In Kyiv, Ukraine's position was crystal clear. Volodymyr Zelensky did not want a missing host negotiation and repeatedly rejected a ceasefire that maintained current lines of control. This was why Trump's message came with a diplomatic back door. If the bilateral with Putin went smoothly, he would push for a triangle round including Zelensky and some EU leaders. Major European outlets covered this extensively, both as a promise of ally consultation and as a tool to diffuse criticism of backroom deals over Ukraine's head. Many reports described prime ministers and presidents across Europe making repeated phone calls to remind the principle.
I told my colleagues, the U.S. president, and our European friends that Putin definitely does not want peace. He wants the occupation of our country, and we all really understand that. Putin will not be able to deceive anyone. We need further pressure for peace, not only American, but also European sanctions.
Ukraine's sovereignty is paramount, and borders changed by force are unacceptable. In Washington, the very severe consequences line instantly triggered the usual debate. What exactly would those deterrent measures be? Policy analysts listed 3 expandable toolkits: tighter financial sanctions on Russia's energy, banking, and defense industries, stricter controls on dual-use technology exports, and diplomatic security levers from additional precision weapons for Ukraine to increased NATO presence on the eastern flank. But Trump, at least publicly, avoided details. I don't have to say it.
And we'll have a quick second meeting between President Putin and President Zelensky and myself if they'd like to have me there. Certain great things can be gained in the first. It's going to be a very important meeting, but it's setting the table for the second meeting.
This vagueness kept the message flexible but also left markets and allies guessing about its credibility. Of course, any warning is only as strong as its underlying credibility. Here, the biggest gap lay in domestic optics. Just before Alaska, Trump was defending himself against criticism over his portrayal of public safety, from a D.C. press conference to his idea of deploying the National Guard in the Capitol. 2 days before departure, multiple independent fact-checkers and international outlets pointed out that he had exaggerated or ignored falling crime rates. Democrats used this to question the accuracy of his worldview. Republicans countered that it was a side issue, irrelevant to deterring Russia. This back and forth made the Alaska backdrop even more complex, because delivering on very severe consequences requires credibility both abroad and at home. From Moscow, the signal was cool, open to broad talks, but avoiding any European-imposed pace or framework. This made the prospect of a quick deal even slimmer, since if Russia wanted to stall, it could agree to talk without making substantive concessions.
Розвідки і військового командування про те, на що розраховує Путін і до чого реально готується. Зокрема, це і приготування воєнні. Він точно не готується до припинення вогню і війни. Путін налаштований тільки на те, щоб подати зустріч з Америкою як свою особисту перемогу. І далі продовжувати діяти так, як і раніше. Тиснути на Україну.
The Washington Post assessed that Putin was already redrawing the order on his own terms before Alaska even began, framing the game at a great power level, keeping Europe outside the door and forcing the U.S. into one-on-one bargaining. In such a context, Trump's challenge, make the deal or face the consequences, came across as both decisive and risky. If it failed, the backlash would be that he had raised the bar, but failed to meet it. In international newsrooms, archives of past U.S.-Russia encounters that once promised to change the game, but ended neutral, or raised more doubts, from Helsinki 2018 to Syria ceasefire talks, were being dusted off. But Alaska was different. The Ukraine war had entered an expensive war of attrition phase. NATO's and Russia's defense supply chains were under pressure, and global energy prices, shipping insurance rates, and other sensitive markets could all be jolted by a single diplomatic signal. That is why the phrase "very severe consequences" was examined word by word. Was it an empty threat, or the marker of a new chapter in sanctions, export controls, and forced deployments? The answer, in truth, would not come from the press podium, but from the closed-door table where two men would face each other in Anchorage. While diplomats calculated their moves, the U.S. domestic media and political front exploded in a very 2025 fashion. Short clips, flashy graphics, and late-night A Closer Look segments dissecting every word. From CNN to late-night shows, the very severe consequences story was set alongside Trump's other remarks about D.C., the National Guard, and even a slip of the tongue over Alaska, Russia, painting the portrait of a candidate who likes to raise the bar and let the media finish the drama. Supporters rolled out an alternative version. This was strategic deterrence, delivering a vague yet firm message that forces the opponent to estimate the cost, while the U.S. keeps flexibility in its toolkit. Forums and nighttime podcasts buzzed. Where's the line between calculated strategic ambiguity and a lack of detail that undermines trust? At the same time, the hard news outlets played a cooling role, seeking answers to two questions. 1. What ceasefire framework would be on the table? And 2. What exactly were the consequences the U.S. had in mind? Reuters, ABC, Fox News, and Al Jazeera noted the common thread. Trump avoided detailing sanctions, tariffs, or military measures. He only emphasized there would be consequences if Putin didn't stop the war. This both fit the diplomatic tradition of not showing your hand before a summit and fueled suspicion. Did the U.S. actually have a strong enough set of options ready with Allied backing? Or was the warning merely a psychological pressure tactic before the 0 hour? On the Allies' front, Europe's message was consistent. there is no room for territorial compromise. British, German, and French media stress the fear that Washington's shortcut diplomacy could erode the international legal principles the EU relies on. The Guardian reported that European leaders had planted the flag in principle during exchanges with Trump, insisting that any negotiation framework must start with a ceasefire and security guarantees for Ukraine. In return, U.S. officials explained that Alaska was only a feel-out meeting, a testing session, with real negotiations to include Kyiv. Still, Trump's confidence in his 2-minute decision unsettled many capitals. If everything is decided in a blink, who will ensure every execution detail? On the American media side, another theme emerged. Would the very severe consequences warning truly land if the U.S. itself was still debating the data and priorities underpinning it?
I'd like to have a meeting with Putin that I think it'll be good, but it might be bad. And I'm here for one reason, to get rid of a war that somebody else started. Should have never happened. And if I could end it, great. Complex war, a lot of bad blood, But Zelensky's been there for 3.5 years, so if you put him in a room, now I will say this, ultimately I'm going to put the two of them in a room. I'll be there or won't be there.
Fact Check series pointed out that Trump's descriptions of D.C. crime rates didn't match recent figures, or at least omitted the post-peak decline. Critics argued if he tends to bend numbers domestically, he could stretch the frame abroad to sell a weak deal. Supporters countered, verifying city crime stats has nothing to do with deterring Russia. What matters is a president's resolve and ability to make the opponent pay. This very debate reflected a broader reality. Whatever the Alaska outcome, it would be judged not only by its substance but also by the story each side told afterward. Financial markets, as usual, reacted less noisily than social media, but with sharper risk notes. Geopolitically sensitive capital watched 3 variables. I, the durability of any ceasefire, I, the trajectory of new or eased sanctions, and I, Europe's reaction to any framework signed without Kyiv present. Several Wall Street bank reports stated bluntly, a vague deal could trigger a short-term rally but cause prolonged volatility if each clause was contested the next day. Conversely, a public breakdown could send energy and shipping insurance prices soaring, especially if paired with an immediate consequences package. Many Asian investors made similar notes, viewing Alaska as a psychological turning point, temporary détente, or controlled escalation. Another notable point, the Alaska meeting unfolded under the twin lenses of traditional media and the short video ecosystem. When Trump spoke at the Kennedy Center and pivoted to security, late-night shows and online clips had already built a story frame of a president injecting security messaging into every stage. And as the script played out, Alaska emerged as Act 3. In that frame, whatever happened in Anchorage would be distilled into a few words. He delivered, or he failed. And that kind of framing can sway voters' minds more than a PDF full of clauses. For this reason, both campaign teams prepared their post-Alaska story packages in advance. If there were signs of a ceasefire, Trump's side would highlight effective pressure, ending war through strength, and unveil hints of a triangle roadmap with Kyiv and the EU. If not, they would say, "We tried. Russia must pay now," and pivot to sanctions and export controls. Democrats had their counter-scenarios ready. If the deal was thin, they would frame it as a weak trade-off, swapping security for a photo op. If it collapsed, they'd emphasize raising the bar, ending up empty-handed.